What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TOJ Talks. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at Will Pilot on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, TOJ Pod all 32. Hope everyone's having a nice Saturday morning. A little bit of a quiet period in the NFL offseason. We are past phase one of free agency, past technically really phase two, kind of on to a little bit of, you'll see some vets sign over the next, and some trades maybe over the next, 2 to 3 weeks. Then it'll be pretty quiet up until the draft. Draft night, you'll see some trades, and then things will pick back up in early June post OTAs. We're going to see a lot of veterans and kind of those quote unquote bigger names that are still remaining, more of those vet guys. They'll end up signing then because, it allows them to not have to go to mini camp and OTAs, and they can kind of see and assess the roster situation of these different organizations and see, hey, can I start here, or am I going to be a reserve guy? Who's going for it? Who's not? I want to come on here and talk just a little bit about kind of state of the Jets a little bit here through, we're 11 days in or whatever it may be, 12, 13 days in, I guess, into free agency, the NFL offseason as a whole, and just kind of see where the Jets are at. We talked a little bit about this last week, but, obviously from the quarterback position, we've talked about it a million times. It's beating a dead horse at this point. The Jets did the most logical thing for them. Is it a fail-proof situation? Absolutely not. But, obviously you're betting on the upside of Fields. Stability if you need BF Tyrod, and maybe you draft a rookie, maybe you don't. I think I'm at this point with the amount of holes on this roster, I'm kind of leaning towards sitting out the quarterback draft as a whole. I think if it's a Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shook, where there's some significant upside potentially there, maybe it'd have to be in the right spot. I'm not like reaching for either of those guys if they're there and we feel good about them. Yeah, sure, shoot your shot, but with Fields locked in for this year, and if you cut him next year, it's a pretty significant. $10 million depending on how you look at it. To some people, that's really significant. To some people, that's not. He's kind of probably here 2 years. Tyrod's gone after the year, but of course, there's void years there. I'm not going to get into the whole Jordan Travis situation. Let's see if he's at camp and practicing, and if he is, that's great, wonderful. Go for it, young fellow. But I think maybe you'd take a guy on day 3. I feel like with the holes in this roster, right tackle, defensive tackle, safety potentially, wide receiver, tight end, it's just even edge to an extent. I just have a hard time kind of spending a top 75 pick on a quarterback that you hope has no intention of playing probably this year or even next year, because you're going to likely draft your first round guy unless Justin Fields has what we all hope will be a Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, Jared Goff type, kind of reincarnation, I guess, with the Jets. Running back, I think we've talked about a million times. I wish the Jets, I still wouldn't be opposed if they took a running back in this class, just because it's such a good running back class. There's 15, 20 guys who can contribute. Maybe there's more than that. And maybe it's on day 3, you take an upside guy that can be a returner for you. Can that guy be a third down specialist, something like that, to maybe spell Brees at times? Or do you take a goal line guy to him and Braylon Allen are your, short yardage guys? I don't know what it may be. I'm not saying it's a priority by any means, but it's a damn good class. And again, the Jets are in a good situation with, where this running back roster depth chart's at. But we're a year away from Brees Hall being a free agent, and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis already entering, the year before free agency. So it just, the way the Jets have drafted under Joe Douglas, I'm not saying it was a bad strategy, but in any means, but it was a lot of, hey, dart throws outside of round 1, obviously, and it's worked, and you keep cycling through, but that means you kind of have to always take one. So again, am I advocating they have to take a running back? No, but it's a really strong class. If the Jets took one, wouldn't begrudge them in any way, shape, or form, especially if they want to be this ground and pound team. And we saw last year, hey, when Brees goes down and it's just Isaiah and Braylon Allen, they're fine. I actually like Isaiah Davis a little better than Braylon Allen. I think that's one of my hotter Jets takes at the moment. It just, the end of the year, looked more explosive. He looked like he just had no fear. He just hit the hole and just go. And Braylon kind of was like, didn't look quite as good as he did, week 1 and week 2. That's part in coaching, and I expect him to have a much better year and scheme and the whole thing. I just, I liked what I saw from Davis. The Jets don't really they have a fullback on the roster. I personally think that they should be drafting multiple tight ends in this draft. And I think one of the tight ends should be a day 3 pick that can probably be your kind of like, your fullback / more of your quote unquote blocking tight end. They signed Stone Smart. Um, Everyone he asks around the Jets is really excited about him, and they're happy, and they think they got a great value there, and he's got some untapped potential. Um, we'll see. He had some nice moments last year. He also, I mentioned this, and I'm not being a dick here, but like Jim Harbaugh talking about how great he is doesn't really do it for me, just because they didn't tender him, and he's a 26-year-old guy that was going to cost him $1 million. Like they didn't have to do that. So when you get non-tendered like that, it's hard for me to be like the team loves you. All that said, I think there's reason to be excited about his potential at the F position. Can he be an explosive guy? Can he go from 16 or 17 catches to 35? Can he go from 170 yards, whatever it was, to 340? Can he go from 1 or 2 touchdowns to 4 touchdowns? Like I think realistic and would be decent goals there. I think outside of that on tight end, look, they let Tyler Conklin walk. My frustration with that is not about even necessarily the player. My frustration is you're likely going to be drafting a tight end in the top 75. I mean, I'd be floored if they didn't. You might be drafting a tight end in the top 7. Tight end's a really difficult position. You have to be an offensive lineman. You have to be a receiver. You have to be, at times, a running back, a fullback. Like it's one of the most complex positions in the league because you're doing everything. Not having to have a guy come in. Yes, Tyler Warren would have been the day one starter. I'm not saying that by any means. Mason Taylor probably would be a day one starter. Like, it's not about that. It's about going into camp and saying, like, this guy doesn't have to hit the ground running day one of camp where everyone's freaking out. There's so much pressure on this dude. Having a stable veteran that's there, that does things the right way, that's a great locker room guy, that is a consistent player. Yeah, he wasn't as good last year. No one was as good last year. The 2 years prior was a much more productive player, in my opinion, and contested catches, running the seams, corner routes, different things. Like the offense as a whole last year was dog shit. And he signed for $3 million. And I just feel like you give Brandon Stevens $12 million. You're like, can't wait to dish out this massive deal. And, but then you have like these other value deals where you look at a Josh Myers or you look at a Stone Smart. Those guys make sense. Like I feel like, frankly, Conklin, $3 million would have been easy. That way, too, hey, Tyler Warren goes down for a week with a sprained ankle. You're not right back to everyone shit on Jeremy Ruckert all year, and I hope he's going to be better this year. I think there's a lot that's left to be desired there, and I think he lost confidence last year. I think there was just a whole myriad of things, and I'm sure he's going to come in great shape. He's got a lot of pressure. He's got to perform this year, and like if he wants to contribute, all those things are true. But it would have been nice to be like, hey, Warren and Conklin are your 1 and 2, and Stone Smart's your kind of dart throw, and you can get creative, and you can go run 13 personnel and do these different things. And I'm sure they still can do that. I just felt like, yeah, if your argument was like, hey, we don't want to bring a 30-year-old tight end back that we don't love at $12 million a year, $10 million, that's fair. My frustration is like it costs $3 million, and who are those leaders in that locker room right now? Who are the guys that are going to answer the tough questions in post games when nobody else has the balls to do so? Because that's been a big thing the last couple of years for sure. Been Quincy, a couple other guys, but the only ones that stood up there game after game, horrible performance after horrible performance, and took accountability, as opposed to just like the fake accountability or the I'm not going to answer questions or the mopey attitude. Like I just feel like that stuff is important, and there's a price to pay in the NFL for it. And I felt like it was just an easy bring them. I just felt like that was an easy one to bring back. And again, it's not about like, oh my God, I think he's the best player of all time. It has nothing to do with that. I just think there was a lot there, and I felt like it would have raised the floor of the tight end room, knowing, hey, if you go with Warren or Taylor or Arroyo, whatever, they just can like have somebody who's been there, done that, that's like worked their way up the depth chart, and has been able to kind of figure it out. It's like, hey, can we like, latch onto this dude, make sure we're doing things the right way, like show me how to do it. I just felt like they don't really have that in that locker room now, in terms of the tight end room, and that. Warren will be fine, right? If they go with Warren, and these guys will be fine. Mason Taylor's got his dad and all these people. Like I'm not. Again, it's a long-winded rant of it. Just like I get the movement. You want to go 26, 27 or younger. You want to go long arms, faster, like explosive. Try to get some cheap deals, high upside guys in free agency. I understand the move in free agency, and I understand why they're doing what they're doing, but either they didn't read the market correctly in terms of they thought they were going to get a comp pick, which would be more concerning, or it's like, hey, we're going to go with this youth movement, Stone Smart. And again, like totally cool with bringing Stone Smart in. I just felt like he's really valuable. They're probably going to have to keep 4 tight ends, realistically. They're going to probably have some type of fullback / tight end. They'll probably keep 3 tight ends. They probably should at this point if they want to be a running football team. They want to run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. They want to do these different things. So like you could do a lot worse than having, your tight end to be a guy that's a consistent 500 plus yard, a season guy. And, again, just would have been good for a rookie to be around. Pass catcher, outside of tight end, again, I think they'll go, the Arroyo, Warren, Ferguson, probably, Taylor, one of those guys, early in rounds 1, 2, or 3, and then maybe potentially go back and address it. I've talked about Jackson Hawes a million times. The reason I continue to talk about him is because he represents the culture, brand, and transition of kind of scheme and philosophy they want to run. He wants to punch you in the fucking mouth over and over and over again, and not just talks about it the way Robert Saleh liked to talk about, bringing him out into the deep water. This dude does it play after play, game after game, and then backs it up and talks a bunch of junk. Like, the Jets need more of that, frankly, and that's why, again, and Andre Sisco, for example, these guys they brought in on defense that, hey, like, they're about that life, and they're about the physical nature of football, and like they want to, in 2025, man, like not everyone's about it. And the Jets, we've seen that from Jets teams of the past, and I feel like adding some of those guys that are about that would be a huge addition. Receiver is a huge issue, and again, receiver and tight end can be easily fixed through the draft. Don't get me wrong, like there's plenty of good receivers on day 1. Not necessarily as much day 1, but day 2 and day 3, like there's plenty of guys that could come in and contribute. We obviously Connor is as high as anybody on Jaden Higgins, but like Jaden Higgins would be a great addition at the top of the second round. Jack Besh, I don't know if there's anybody higher on Jack Besh than me. Would be a great addition at the top of the second round. Io Maynard, there's different names, right? Jalen Knoll, other guys like that, maybe it's a Luther Burden does fall to round 2. Maybe it's, I don't know, the league doesn't love Emeka Ibuka as much as we all do, and he's available at 36, and the Jets say, you know what, screw it, let's go just keep building this Ohio State team up. The point being, like, they can certainly address receiver and tight end. I just worry a little bit, and I think if you're being honest with yourself, and I think Joe and Connor touched on this a little bit, if you're being honest with yourself, they have put quite a bit of pressure on this draft to be nearly perfect. And could they have a 2006 or 2022 draft? I certainly damn hope so. That'd be fantastic. No one would be as happy as I will. And I'm not down on this organization or down on the team or down on Glenn and Moosh, anything like that. I just feel like I would have liked to see 1 or 2 pass catchers added through free agency, not just a Tyler Johnson who, if you're being honest with yourself, yeah, could be a fun player. He's like a barely rosterable guy on a good team. He's your ideal wide receiver 5. And right now he's like the Jets wide receiver 2.5. And again, they have plenty of time to address these things. It's just as we sit here, end of March, I would have liked to see one veteran move of like a guy. It's like, hey, I can count on this dude for 40 catches for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. And it'll be a good locker room presence. The floor is higher. I feel good about it. It's a 1-year flyer deal. Yeah, he doesn't fit the mold of being 24 years old. And I keep repeating myself here, but I understand the concept of wanting to go high risk, but very high reward, and younger guys that are either entering their prime or in their prime, and maybe just had a down year in 2023, cheaper. We're not locked in long term. I'm not talking doing anything crazy, but it would be nice. And I know everyone's talked a lot about it, but I wasn't extremely high on going into free agency because I thought they'd be more aggressive on a Josh Palmer, on a Tim Patrick, because those guys, at least, again, those like, what you're getting. I guess maybe you do try to revisit we try to bring in a Lockett or, a Keenan Allen, a Diggs, one of these guys. And again, I'm not saying they're going to do this. They likely will not. And I'm not even necessarily sure I'm advocating for it. I just feel like it'd be nice to have a guy who's like ideally your wide receiver 3, but at least in the start of camp can run with the ones and can be that pro in the locker room and like alleviate some of the stress from Garrett, because it does put pressure on Garrett. Now Garrett's got to be a guy who's been really awesome, but there's definitely 2 or 3 levels left to his game. Going to be a lot of pressure on him. Likely, hopefully he'll be a guy that's gotten paid. And no Rodgers and a lot of people in the fan base, and I'm not one of them, but there's a lot of people in the fan base who are going to be like, the second Garrett drops one pass, are going to be all over him because, hey, I wanted Rodgers back, and that's the whole thing. I don't subscribe to that. I'm just telling you that's the reality of the situation. So The Jets need to add 3 pass catchers in this draft, whether it's tight end, it's 2 receivers and a tight end, 2 tight ends and a receiver. Honestly, I'd advocate for even more, but at a minimum, it needs to be 3 pass catchers in this draft because if you go into next season with Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall in the running back room, that's great. And your tight end room is Terrence Ferguson and Jeremy Ruckert, and your receiver room is Garrett Wilson, Io Maynor, and Lazard, or, I don't know, maybe it is Johnson or whoever. I just feel like you need more. And again, maybe it's a vet, maybe it's multiple guys in the draft. I'd like to see, feels like it's a little too much patience at a spot where you got to help out a Justin Fields. You got to help out the defense and Aaron Glenn, stuff like that. And again, it's not a 1-year project. But I think it's a 3 to 4 pass catcher draft because they simply haven't really addressed it through free agency. If anything, they've let a lot of guys walk, and maybe that was the right thing to do, and we'll see in time. Offensive line wise, I think it's 1 or 2 additions. Joe and Connor talked a lot about the free agency. I mean, the flexibility of an AVT and a Josh Myers, whether it's you draft the right tackle at 7, you draft the right tackle at 42, or you potentially, go playmaker at 7 and maybe at 42. And in round 3, you're looking for a guard. And, you're just going to beef up the interior. You're going to, AVT's been cleared by sports science. He's been cleared by everybody. He's on board to playing right tackle. Chuks Okorafor is your swing. Max Mitchell's your last resort at right tackle, can probably play guard. One of him or Carter Warren don't make the roster, and you're off to the races. I think this offensive line is going to be good. And again, if you were able to bring in a Jackson Hawes or bring in obviously a Tyler Warren or something like that, can they help you chip? If you remember back last year against the Steelers, TJ Watt, I don't believe, had a single pressure. And Morgan Moses was hampered for sure with the leg. I think, Conklin and Ruckert had hands on Watt every single play. No matter what, they knew Rodgers was banged up and the whole thing. And obviously they got out of a hot start there. And unfortunately, Rodgers and the defense and pretty much the rest of the team shut down their leg and at the end of the first half and the rest of the game. But the game plan was working where TJ Watt wasn't disrupting. You're going to have to do a lot out of Fields. Again, he can buy time. Rodgers couldn't. Defensively, they've added some defensive tackles. I like what they've done, at least of we're going to bring a ton of bodies in the interior next to Quinnen. You still got to they need another guy, whether it's a Mason Graham in round 1, whether it's a Tyleek Williams in round 2. It doesn't matter. It's got to be at least one body there, I think, is a guy that can ideally plug and play and be a run stuffer next to Quinnen and eat double teams and 2 gap and do these different things, that can, force Quinnen to be able to be singled up a little bit because last year, again, had 0 opportunities to do so. In terms of the rest of the group on defense, I still think they need another corner. I know they signed Stevens, but I'd like to draft the guy, and probably it's a day 3 guy, realistically. Maybe it's a Benjamin Morrison on day 2 or someone like that can play heavy man coverage if the hips checked out. Love the prospect, love the player. Is more efficient and plays better man than anybody in this class, arguably. So he's a name, whether it's an AZ Thomas if he falls, or is it, do they kind of dip into more of the Upton Stouts of the world and things like that? And I think they need another safety. I'd like the idea of Cisco and Stevens as your safeties and drafting a corner and Stiggers. And I would have liked, obviously potentially an Eccles back, but, Isaiah Oliver can, be kind of that rotational guy that can play anywhere as a backup. You get a healthy Michael Carter and he'll play well. You'll get a healthy and playing well Sauce. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this group. And it sounds like I'm kind of down on what's going on. And again, I just, to kind of finish here, it's not about that I don't think they've done some nice things. I think the Cisco signing was a nice signing. I think getting Fields was the best case scenario of what you were going to be able to achieve this offseason, realistically, outside of trading up to 1. I think this is a bit of a transition. It's a youth movement, and you want to build your own culture. And Aaron Glenn and Darren Mushi are kind of want to establish their roots here, and you clear out a lot of this always happens with new regimes. I do just feel like in some cases, and we'll see, how it goes. I think that getting a comp pick would be great. Getting these different comp picks is great, and that's really good organizations are able to do so. It's just hard for me to focus on that when I've never seen these guys even draft yet. And again, I'm not saying it's a wrong theory. It's just it's cool that the Ravens and the Eagles get a lot of comp picks. It's because they have a solidified, way that we know they're going to draft really well. I hope the Jets get to that point. That'd be fantastic, where they can, make a decisions of which one of these three awesome guys do we not keep, and we'll get a third round comp pick for him, and we're going to take advantage every year, and we'll replace our interior offensive line or D line, stuff like that. I hope the Jets get to that point. That'd be fantastic. I'm excited about this team. I'm excited about where they're going. I just think they've put so much damn pressure on themselves with this draft that they kind of have to hit, for the cycle. They gotta get hot from the 3-point line multiple times. And I think Joe and Connor referenced this, and I couldn't agree. I'd even go a step further. I think they need 2 impact starters in the first 3 rounds. That's the level where they're at. I think a lot of guys will play better than they did last year. I think they got some unluckiness with health and a lot of different things, and the coaching sucked, and the special teams was terrible, and all those things will get fixed. I truly believe that, and I think they'll be around an 8 to 9 win team as it currently stands. But that also relies on Armand Membu or Tyler Warren or Mason Graham coming in and being pretty awesome year 1, and it means in round 2 it's a Jack Besh or a Benjamin Morrison or a Tyleek Williams or whoever you pick your poison, Jaden Higgins coming in and being a legit contributor and pretty much an impact player. Not an Elijah Moore. I mean, maybe to Elijah Moore, I guess, year 1 before he went off the deep end. But it can't be a Denzel Mims situation. It can't be. It got to be. Maybe it's not Brees to that level, but pretty damn close. And again, at pick 73, whether maybe it's a quarterback, so it's a different situation. If not, if it's a D tackle, it's got to be a guy who's a rotational piece and at least adding, raising the floor of that unit. Or if it's a right tackle, if it's Big Oz from BC, I'd like to see him win the job in camp and be a legit player year 1. Because, it's just what you're hoping for. And that's what good organizations are able to do. So we just ramble for 22 minutes. Apologize if I sounded negative. It's more of just, I want to see this. I want to see them win. And all the mantra and all these different things is to put your seatbelt on, and we're going to be consistent. We want to win right now. And we'll see. We'll just, it's kind of TBD for me of how they're going to approach this thing. Because do they get aggressive? Do they trade back and accumulate picks? Do they, just sit at their spot and kind of, do they draft more high upside guys? Do they say, screw it, we don't care what Jets fans think, we're going to go Jahdae Barron or Shamar Stewart or Jalen Walker at 7? Or do they kind of follow chalk of, needing offensive playmakers? Again, we'll see. A lot to unpack here. Live events 3 weeks out. A lot on the feed. Appreciate it for listening. I'll be back on the TOJ Pod feed on Tuesday. Appreciate it for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Enjoy your weekend.